Hello, hello. Welcome back to What's Working Now. I'm your host, Katie Richardson. Super excited to be here. This is where we talk about how do you access your untapped potential. And today I have an amazing guest. He's going to talk to us about how he's done that and how he's doing it right now. Today we have the awesome and the amazing Josh Tapp. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What an awesome intro. I feel so excited to be here and honored to be here, honestly, being here with Katie Richardson. How cool is that?
Josh, we're super excited to hear a little bit more of your story. And you and I were talking before we hopped on, and I honestly don't know a lot of your story. And we were connected by somebody else. And I'm really excited to just naturally learn your story because you're a guy who, one, has a podcast, The Lucky Titan, and then you also have a service where you help people create content from maybe the repurposed content that they're currently creating. So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what it is that you're doing, so we have some of that base foundation information on you.
Right. Oh, I love that. And honestly, I could go clear back to when I was born, right? But I'm actually a fifth generation entrepreneur. So
Get
it's
out.
really deeply ingrained in my
Yes,
DNA.
it is. It's in your blood,
Uh,
literally.
What's really interesting though is my family, I think the last two generations really weren't very successful. My father and his father. Successful financially is what I would say.
Okay.
Successful in other ways. My father's a very successful man. Love him to death. He's the one who gave me this entrepreneurial spirit, to be sure. But his primary business that he had when I was growing up. So from the time I was 6 years old until I was 20, I believe, he had a construction company building cabins. Now,
Okay.
if you know me at all, I hate hard manual labor. I'm just not a big fan of
Okay.
it. I can do it. I was taught how to work hard. Not a big fan of it. But my dad would pay us, $10, $15 an hour when we were little kids to just do work. So I learned the value that, hey,
Awesome.
I put in hours, I get a certain amount of money. But my dad did something that completely changed my paradigm when I was about 11. He was studying somebody like Tony Robbins or somebody, I believe, and he kind of came up with this idea and decided to test it on me. And he said, "Hey, Josh, I'm going to sit you down and I'm going to give you this list of books. If you'll read any of these books and you report back to me what you've learned, I'll pay you $60. And in my head, I was a pretty good reader at the time. And I'm like, hey, if I read a book every 2 hours, every 3 hours, I'd be making more than having to lift a hammer. I wouldn't have to come anymore. And I don't think my dad anticipated that, because over the next week and a half, I think I read like 6 books.
Get out.
He was having to just shell cash. But I
You
remember
said you were 11?
I was 11 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And these had to be business or leadership oriented books.
Okay.
I remember walking. So my dad had this office that had just walls of bookshelves. I mean, everything from personal development to fiction, right? Everything that you could think of. But he had a
Okay.
specific section for business. I remember sitting there at 11 years old, just like, holy crap, there's so many books here. And I was looking for the smallest, thinnest book I could get, because my brain's thinking, hey, an hour or two read and I could be making more money, right?
Yeah.
Little mischievous me. But I end up reaching and pulling out The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
If you haven't read that book, it's a fantastic book. But that's the
So
one that
good.
it just sticks with me. And it really sold me on the value of entrepreneurship. And to this day, I still teach about this all the time, about that book, because it's so valuable, what he teaches there. Have you read that one, Katie?
I have. Yeah. And it's one of the first ones that I read as well.
Probably
Not at
because it was
11. Not at 11. I think I was
Probably.
25 when I read it.
Hey, no, it doesn't matter when you read it. It's very, very valuable. So that, to me, that was really just what set me on the entrepreneurial journey in general and got me around entrepreneurs. And I'm really grateful to my dad, because he got me around so many successful people. He had a lot of successful friends. We weren't ever very successful in our family as far as financially speaking. We were kind of the poor kids on the block, but he got me around wealthy people. I remember my first experience sitting next to a millionaire, just feeling like, holy cow, teach me your ways. I'm 12 years old at that point, like, teach me your ways. And still to this day, it's probably one of my favorite things, is sitting down with somebody who is not just financially successful, but successful in life,
Yeah.
and seeing how entrepreneurship made them. That's probably one of the reasons I started the podcast,
So
honestly.
cool. So cool. I have a question for you, Josh.
Yeah.
Hearing this story and hearing how your perspective on the world through this lens of entrepreneurship was formed at such a young age, was there a point on your entrepreneurial journey where all of a sudden life was not matching up to that future vision that you had for yourself? Maybe it was a failure, or things just weren't moving as fast as they were. Tell me about a point when it was just not matching up with your vision.
Yeah, and I love that question. What a super well formulated question. She's done her homework, guys. This is awesome. So, Katie, the point for me that I think was just that pivotal moment. I had just gotten married. So me and my wife had just probably been married under a year at this point, and I was trying to start my first business. I was in college. She was just finishing up college, and both of us were trying to get our undergraduate degrees. And I was trying to start a business doing Facebook ads for people. And I was in there kind of like busting it out in between. I was trying to do homework and work on two
What
different
year
screens
was
at the same
this?
time. This was 2015, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Good time
And
for Facebook ads. You were
yeah, exactly.
early.
It was the
Yeah.
perfect time to be on there.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to like figure out how to get clients and everything. And I was so new to this world of digital entrepreneurship. So I
Hmm.
was just trying to pick up and I was buying courses and learning in school and trying to do my best to figure it all out. Um, and we had two clients, and they were basically feeding me and my family at that point. And the
Wow.
bigger of the two clients called me while I was trying to do homework and their work at the same time, and was like, "Hey, you guys did a great job. We have enough leads to last us another year and a half. I think we're just gonna let go of you, or fire your agency right now." I had overperformed, gotten them so
Oh,
much business that they fired us. And I remember sitting back in my chair and just wanted to pull my hair out, going, "What? Like I
wow.
provided you too much business, and you're gonna?" It was just this super deep depths moment for me where I realized I'm like, I am not doing what I want to do. I was not interested in the Facebook ads at all. We actually
Mm.
use them to this day, and I still don't ever do them myself. I always have somebody else to do it because for me, it wasn't really where my passion rested. And I remember at the time though, I had bought into a mastermind, and I was sitting next to this guy, multimillionaire. He's a 2 Combo Club winner from Russell Brunson's community, the ClickFunnels community. And he leaned over to me because this was probably 2 days after this experience. He leaned over to me and was like, "Josh, why don't you have a podcast? I know you're always talking about how you wanted to do one, and him and I had become friends at this point.
Okay.
And I remember just having the light bulb go off in my head. I'm like, yeah, why am I doing Facebook ads? I hate Facebook ads. I'm like, I was trying so hard to be an entrepreneur, but I was doing what sounded like the fastest route to money. And Facebook ads just
Mm.
kind of appeared that way to me.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this paradigm shift for me where I realized I care about successful people. I care about being around successful people. And it brought me back to that experience where I was on the couch with my first millionaire, right? And I just remembering that and remembering how good it felt to be with them and having them build me up. And so that's where the podcast really came from. And that podcast came from that darkest moment. And
Gosh,
it's
that's a really interesting story. You know, as any entrepreneur who has had clients or customers, you lose a customer, you go find another one, right? But
right,
that's not what you learned in that moment. What you learned in that moment was, I'm not passionate about Facebook ads. I
right,
want something that has meaning to me. And so rather than going and getting more money, you identified that what you wanted was, yes, money, like we need to feed the family, and I want something that has meaning to me. That's
right.
huge that you saw that so early on.
Yeah. I appreciate that compliment. Honestly, I look at that moment too, and a lot of people will say, "Well, how did you still feed your family?" And the honest truth, and I don't know if you believe in God, the universe, or whatever, but for me, I feel like God brought us a job right at that time. My wife had just graduated from college at that point, or was just about to, and she had a job just fall in her lap. And so she
Wow.
provided for us for 2 years while I built my company, so we could actually
Wow.
get things going for us. And I just felt like all the pieces were lining up because I decided to follow what I felt was more of a calling for me than just
Yeah.
chasing the money. And the podcast was that, and meeting all these amazing people. And it's just become, honestly, probably my favorite time of day is meeting podcasters. So that's what I like to do all day.
So that's when you started your podcast,
Right.
was when you lost that client, God provided, and your wife got an incredible job. She was able to provide for the family, feed the family, so that you could develop the foundation of what is now the Lucky Titan.
Right. Yep.
Incredible.
It's funny to look back and see that, because those moments, and I love that you asked that question, because those moments are crippling to a lot of people. And I know
Mhm.
for me, we as entrepreneurs, we tend to like highlight the overcoming of that problem. But I mean, for
Yeah.
3 or 4 days, I was done. I was ready to quit. I was ready to go work at McDonald's, whatever I had to do to provide for my family. It was a
Yeah.
dark time, and that just happens for all of us. And I would be lying to you to say that I hadn't had that happen dozens of times throughout my entrepreneurial journey. And even now, where we have attained a level of success, those moments do happen. And sometimes they're not just financial, but there gets that point where you're just like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I on the right path? And
Mhm.
a lot of times I feel like that's just God having you reaffirm this is the right path for you. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's wrong. So I love that quote.
So good. Just because it's hard does not mean that it's wrong. How did you, okay, you said there was like 3 or 4 days before your wife got that job. That's a small gap. I mean, it's a
Right.
gap,
The
but it
gap.
is a small gap. What I'm hearing you say though is that you had made this decision that you were going to do something that was meaningful to you.
Right. And honestly, the time frame I would honestly say is probably around 2 or 3 weeks. But
Okay.
for me, it was I decided to close our ad agency. I actually went to my clients and refunded them, which was a scary
Wow.
moment for us, and just said for the next couple of months that they had paid us for. And I said, hey, here's a better agency. Go hire them. I'll refund you and get you in touch with them. And I closed the doors. Versi Marketing. The website's probably still up actually because I've never taken the time to pull it down, but it's still there. And that site or that company has just fizzled out. We decided to just say let's
Yeah.
start from scratch. Let's try
Yeah.
again. And that clean slate moment was honestly the most freeing moment for me because I said, okay, I've now experienced a lot of successes and failures in this. What do I need to do to start faster? And if you
Wow.
watch, and you've probably seen this, Katie, interviewing entrepreneurs, it's so funny to me. I think the statistic is 95% of businesses fail. But what people don't realize is that's actually 95% of first businesses. But it's something like 70 to 80% of second businesses that people start are actually successful. And they survive the 5 year gap. It's really intriguing. And I've seen
Wow.
that over and over again with people I've interviewed where
Yeah.
the first one was just an epic failure. They're kind of embarrassed because the product was so dumb, right?
Yeah.
But then they went on to create a very, very successful company. And it's fun to see that with entrepreneurs.
You know, there's another really important distinction that I'm seeing as you share this story. Um, you made the choice to go pursue what had meaning to you. You were learning from your experiences in a way. Okay, this is the distinction I was seeing. You are a man. This is what I'm hearing from you. You're a man who lives your principles. You had an experience that woke you up and said, hey, money's not the only thing here, Josh. You need something that has meaning. And you immediately took action and you went and fired your clients because you realized that that didn't have meaning and significance to you. And
Right.
you didn't know what was going to happen on the other side of that. And that's what I wanted to highlight here is consistently as I have conversations with high performers like you is the level of commitment to living your principles. And I think this is a place where people so often get lost is, well, yeah, I'd live my principles if it was convenient.
Right.
If I had the money, then I would go. And you weren't looking at it that way. You were like, these are my principles. And that is, I'm going to live my values and meaning, creating a business that has meaning and that fulfills me, right? That creates that fulfillment. That's something that's important to me. And that experience woke you up to that and you went and took action.
Yeah, and I am
So
sitting here
good.
wanting to take notes. That was such a good section. You just summed up my life, Katie. I love it.
Well, I think that's what people really needed to see today from your experience is it wasn't convenient what you did. It
Right.
was not convenient. Yet at the same time, you believed your principles. And I mean, I can ask you about the faith required to like, what was that conversation with your wife when you said,
Right.
I'm going to go fire the few customers that I do have and get rid of the little income that we do have coming in. I
Yeah.
mean, Josh, what was required in that moment? What were you focused on that allowed you to go and do that big, bold thing when you had no promise or guarantees of what was going to happen on the other side of that?
Yeah, that's such a cool question because I mean, for me, it comes down to having that hope and that belief that there is something better. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if they're sitting here saying the money, the money, the money, the money in their head, and they're not saying like, what do I actually want to do all day? And they're actually aligning what their values are, not what other people are pushing on them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost an easier decision, I would say. The hardest part for me was talking to my wife. She is an angel and is so supportive. But to me, it wasn't, I'm scared to tell my wife because she's gonna get mad at me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
scared to tell my wife that I failed and that I've got to start over again because we'd already put, I think, a year or whatever, year and a half into that company. And our own money had gone into it, and it had been this
Yeah.
big journey for us. Just to have it be like your husband would come home one day and say, "Hey, I've got to start over,"
Shutting the whole thing down.
all our money's gone, right? And it's a scary experience. But I know for me that the part that I've had to come to even recently, we've done some little pivots in our company recently, even
Mhm.
is like you said, aligning those values and figuring out which values are important for you, not which
Yeah.
values are what I would say strategically important or what everybody just
Mhm.
talks about under the hashtag entrepreneur, hashtag business, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
look at the Gary Vaynerchuk's and Grant Cardone's, and it's all about the hustle grind. It's about working super hard and doing all these things. I wouldn't consider myself a lazy person, but I like my downtime. I like Josh time. And I like spending time with my wife and with our
Mhm.
future child, right? I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
But I want to have that time. And I'm one of those people that I don't really want to work more than 20 hours a week. And a lot of people look at me and say, "Hey, you're lazy." But for me, that was one of my values. I said, I want to have a business that was more lifestyle oriented. I could become very successful, but that I would never have to work more than that 10, 20-hour limit, whatever I put on myself.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of given me the hope.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, as I've aligned with those,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed my life a lot more. I've enjoyed business a lot more,
Mhm.
but the success happens faster. It's the weirdest thing. More money will come the less you work. And it's so bizarre.
Well, here's what I'm seeing as you describe all of this is sometimes people will be really smart and hustle and grind and magic will happen and something incredible happens, right? And
Right.
the business takes off, they start to have success, but then as life does, something happens and the success starts to kind of dwindle a little bit. Maybe they start flatlining, maybe they're losing clients. And in that moment, oftentimes what can happen is people have this thought like, did the magic run out?
Right.
And in a sense, they lose that hope. And you were looking beyond your current circumstances and you saw that no, there's something really incredible for me in life. And I'm chasing after it, not in a needy, desperate way, but like by living after your principles and aligning your actions with those principles. So that hope was really critical to you overcoming that moment because like I said, you didn't even have that thought, is the magic running out?
Right. Well, and I'm sure those sort of things cross your mind, but I love looking at life where it's not, even if you don't have faith in yourself being able to accomplish that goal, you need to have faith and hope that it's possible. Because if it's
Mhm.
possible, you can become that. I just believe everybody it's an equal playing field in my mind. I think everybody, especially in the US, has an equal playing field. And if that's the case, it's like, well, then why not me? I'm just going to figure out what it takes and how long it takes. Doesn't really matter because one day I'm going to be there. And I think if you have that perspective, it kind of changes the way you look at it. Instead
Yeah.
of feeling like, well, I've got to hit $1 million this year. I have clients all the time say that to me, like, we want to make $1 million from our podcast. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why that number?
Yeah.
Explain that to me. Like, why that number? And it's because typically $1 million is the benchmark that we all want to accomplish,
Right.
but
Status symbol.
and Katie can obviously attest to this, right? $1 million isn't as much as you think it is, but you
It's
also
not.
don't need $1 million a year to have pretty much everything you could possibly want. Unless you're one of those people who's like, I've got to have 40 private jets and all these things, right? Which if you are, that's great. That's your lifestyle. But for most people, 95% of people, they don't need more than a couple $100,000 a year to just be high on life.
Absolutely. And this kind of plays into a question that you asked me when I was on your podcast, which was, I don't know how you worded it. It was something like, do you ever feel like, I always forget this phrase, false identity? What is it? Not identity fraud. What
Imposter
is it?
syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. You asked, like, do you ever feel imposter syndrome when you're coaching somebody who has a bigger business than you do? And my answer was, no, I don't, because I'm clear on what it is that I want and I know what I want. And sure, I've built multi-million-dollar international business before. That's not what I have right now. And I think that's such an important element, getting clear on what it is that you want. So having a hope that what you want is possible and getting clear on what that is, that what you do actually want, and then going after it. The other thing that I'm hearing from you, Josh, is you are patient. Like you're not in a hurry to get there. Tell me a little bit more about that because yeah, especially young entrepreneurs, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go dominate and I'm going to conquer the world and I'm going to build $1 million business in the next 6 months. Tell me a little bit about that patience. Where did you learn to have that patience and what is that? How does that patience serve you?
And honestly, yeah, that's a deep question. I have to kind of look inside for that because honestly, I feel like it comes from something that my dad taught me growing up, is it does take time. I watched him struggle and struggle and struggle trying to build business after business, but ultimately every single one of his kids has become very successful. I'm one of 8 kids, and
Wow.
almost every so there's 2 of them who are still in high school, but the rest of us have gone on to lead pretty successful lives. And for him, I'm like, look at that track record. Now you
Yeah.
obviously did something right. And for
Mhm.
me, I like to look at that and say it wasn't just from him, but he kind of planted the seed, and I had to dig it up. I had to reap the fruits of that when I was living my own life in business, because for us, we hit a point financially a few years ago where I'm like, we're fine. I have very little needs. I'm kind of just a tech nerd. I like buying new mics, new cameras, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Business expense stuff. This is why my wife hates buying presents for me, because she never knows what to buy me. But I'm not a big car guy. I'm not a big, into all these
Yeah.
different big expensive things. And so for me, it was becoming okay with where I was at and saying, what's going to motivate me to actually want to perform at a higher level? So I'm not just, living life in a mediocre way. And for me, it's more
Mhm.
of, how do I give back? How do I help grow, the legacy of other people? And I know for me, going clear back to sitting next to the millionaire on the couch story, right?
Yeah.
I just remember for me that was probably the most successful I ever felt at 12 years old, right? I was like, this
Yeah.
millionaire sitting here telling me I'm going to be a super successful person. I still have I talk to him all the time now. Actually, he's a good
That's so
friend of my
cool.
dad, but he was one of those first people who believed that I could do it. And when somebody that successful, when you're that young, believes in you, it plants the seed.
It
And
does.
I think it's those lessons that we learn along the way through doing entrepreneurship that we realize that there is always a brighter future. It's just finding what you want. And for me, it was, how do I start to swim in bigger circles, right? How do I get with the people who
Mhm.
they're the right people? I like being around them. I call them life suckers. There's a lot of people like that in the world.
Yeah.
I don't watch the news. I don't follow politics, and a lot of people will disagree with me on these things. But I'm
Mhm.
very, very selective with who I spend time with. And some people, even in my immediate family, I won't spend time with because I don't want to corrupt my inner circle of people in the way that I believe, like, my worldview, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah,
that's
it
what
makes a
most people
lot
have
of
trouble doing.
sense. Yeah, I think a lot of people are very aware and conscious of food wise and maybe drinks, what they're putting in their body. But I think people are not as aware of what they're putting into their mind and who they're letting into their life. You're still consuming. It's just in a different form. Food is physically going into your body. And when you're around somebody, you're taking on their energy, their thoughts, their beliefs, their perspective, their lens on the world. It's impacting you, and it's either benefiting you or it's not benefiting you. And what I'm hearing you say is you're recognizing that, and you're setting boundaries around where you're headed in your life. No, I want to point out one of the things that you said that has helped you get here was making those decisions what it is that you want, but you clearly defined it too. Like it wasn't just like I want $1 million business. It sounds like you had clearly defined it, including things like it has to have purpose and meaning for me. Um, One of the things that you're doing now is part of that definition is right now you are working with people who you believe in, who you want to be around, and who you believe in their products, their services. And that is why you're willing to take them on as a customer and as a client. So tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and how you're living your principles right now inside of the podcast and inside of your content creation business.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That's a great question. For what we do, so for most people who've heard of us, we're Podcast Multipliers is our company name. But where that came from was actually our podcast that I started. I did not grow it intentionally to grow a big following. I said, I want to meet successful people and figure out what they did to win. And that's all I cared
So
about. I
cool.
didn't care about who was even listening to the show. Um, and I got an email from iTunes, I don't know, 2 years ago. And they're like, hey, you hit the top 50 in marketing. And I go, what? I haven't even been like trying. I'm just literally just interviewing people. We had done probably 100 interviews at that point. And I remember saying, okay, what? So I kind of broke down what we had been doing. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, because I got on that list, everybody started reaching out to us saying, what should I be doing with my podcast? How should I be putting my content out there? And I won't lie to you. When we first started doing this, I was not sure of our process. I didn't know what was working, but I had a mentor who said, "You have the team, just task them to this product and start selling this service." And for us at the time, we'd been running masterminds teaching people how to monetize podcasts, not
Hmm.
how to grow them.
Yeah.
And it was such an interesting kind of pivot for us because I just reached out to all of my past guests and we landed 30 clients within 2 weeks.
Oh my
I'm
word.
going, what? There's obviously a need for this. But what was interesting was because I wanted to make a crystal clear, simple offer. I was like, what we want to do is we want to help you make an authority play. And my goal is to help the right person who has the right answer to the question that everybody's asking that you can't find the correct answer to. And to make that simpler for you, I mean, my wife, I mentioned earlier, she's pregnant with our first child at the time of this recording. And I think it was probably 6, 7 weeks into it, she was starting to get a pain right up under her ribs.
Mm.
She Googled it, and there were answers from you worked out too hard, you have a stitch in your side, to your baby has died. And I
Wow.
mean, for us, I mean, can you imagine Googling that? And then my wife, who's a mild hypochondriac, who's like panicking,
Yeah.
saying, oh my gosh, I could be dying. We got to get to the hospital, and my baby could be dying. And so, we went through that whole scenario, and just for everybody's, I guess, ease of mind, is baby's fine.
Thank
But
you.
it was
Thank
it
you.
was just a very mild issue. But what was so
Right.
interesting with that is that really brought to light to me how many poor answers there are to questions. And the internet has made people think that they have access to all of the answers. But the problem is the best answers and the people who are best at answering these difficult questions aren't being heard. And so our
Mm.
company is built around the best, the people who have the right answer. And it's not one they're regurgitating, it's one that they've lived. They have that life experience. So every client we work with is somebody who says, you know what, Josh, I've become successful in this area of my life. They're typically entrepreneurs. That's who we really like to work with.
Hmm.
And they're saying, I know how to build a Facebook ads agency when you're 20 years old in college and starving to death and you don't have any money. I know how to do it. And I know how to help them get there in X amount of time. So for us, what we do is we say, let's build you a podcast and get this in front of 20-year-old college students or whatever, right? And we
Hmm.
focus on taking that little bit of time that this very successful, busy person has. We take that one podcast episode and we turn it into, I think it's 30 to 45 pieces of content. And that gets distributed all over the internet. So that's video, audio, and written content. And what that does is it actually allows them to be seen and heard all over the place. And that allows them to really get their brand out there much quicker. So again, it's more of an authority play, what we do.
Yeah.
Um, and here's the thing, Katie, I'm just going to tell your audience this. We are launching this. By the time this episode goes live, I'm sure you'll see it. But
Yeah.
our website, we're giving away our business model. There's no upsell. There's nothing tied to it.
What?
I literally have videos and I'm like, just go. I'm so passionate about having a podcast. I'm like,
Yeah.
stop failing at it. Just do it this way. This is how it works. So there'll be videos for how to break it apart, how to promote and distribute the content, how to
Uh-huh.
actually get a really good rock solid topic, how to get billionaires to come on your show. Lots of fun stuff. It's just going to be a big, basically free course for everybody. No upsells, no email required, nothing. So
So cool. And tell us the website and we'll
it'll
put it in
just
the
be
show notes.
podcastmultipliers.com/resources.
Okay. That's fantastic, Josh.
So you can
I have
check
to
that
tell
out.
you, Josh, this is so good, by the way. I hope everybody is listening and taking notes because there's a lot of really fantastic nuggets in here. And something that I'm noticing as we're on Zoom, and so I'm seeing you too consistently. I'm seeing how grounded you are as an individual, right? Entrepreneurship is really exciting and it can also be a total roller coaster ride. And sometimes people can lose their grounding, lose their footing, their foundation as they're on this roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship. And yet consistently, I see that you're a very grounded individual. Can you share with us maybe like 2, 3, 4 things that you do in your life, either inside of your business or outside of your business, that help you to be this grounded individual who has focus, who has clarity, and who is able to define what it is that he wants in life? What's helping you to do that?
I appreciate that. It's funny that you say it because I don't feel like I'm that way, but I can tell you a few of the tips that I feel like would be very, very helpful to people. The first one we've already touched on is be so, so, so protective of the people you have around you. The people that you're
Love that.
spending time with. I disagree with the whole moniker of it has to be, the average income thing that we hear, your income is the average of the 5 people you're around. I would agree with that. But I would also say sometimes you can get in really good circles who are going to bless your life in another way. for me in business, I do have a circle. I would say it's probably more than 5 people who I love to be around, who they lift me up. They help me think bigger, going from where $1 million felt big to where I don't feel like any amount is big. That was a huge thing for me. And then, but in my personal life, now that we're having a child, it's really fun to be around young couples like us who
Mhm.
are really good people, really good parents. We have a group of people we actually live near that we spend a lot of time with because
Mhm.
I want to pick up on some of their parenting techniques, So that's the number one would be make sure that you're protecting the circle of people that you're in. And then there was another one that I've actually been applying this a lot more recently that Dean Graciosi mentioned. He just worded it in a really profound way, I feel like. And he said, protect your confidence. He's like,
Mm.
anything that kills your confidence, you have to remove from your life. And I realized that's for me, I have been subconsciously doing that because for me, for example, I know this is going to sound weird. I was not a coordinated kid in high school. I played football and sat the bench for 3 years, and basketball was even worse. My dad was a college basketball player, so you'd think I'd be good at it. I was not. Very uncoordinated. So playing basketball with most of the people that I grew up with actually killed my confidence. It made me feel like I wasn't as successful, right? And I know that doesn't directly translate over to business, but it's kind of weird how that little bits of chinking away at your confidence can kill your overall confidence, your overall success. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I am 100% grounded in my faith. I think having faith in someone or something is absolutely crucial. Most of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed on our show, we've interviewed over 1,000 people now at this point, and every single one of them has some sort of grounding faith in their life. I personally believe in God, and I think that the morals that come from it and my belief system really, really helped me to stay strong with my business and with my integrity in my business. And the fourth and final thing would be a support system. And for me, it's my wife. I mentioned she took care of us and kind of paid my way through starting our company. But she has been absolutely crucial when it comes to growing this business. And it's been interesting for me to watch a lot of the people that I've even partnered with where their wives don't even trust them to take risks. And I would just implore you, if you're the spouse of somebody who's an entrepreneur, let them take risks. It will always pay off. You might lose everything temporarily, but it will come back to you tenfold. I know because my wife lets me take risks and she just trusts me to do it with a smart mind, even though sometimes it's really hurt us.
Sure.
It's always panned out in the end, and she's been very grateful for it in the end as well. So those would be my big four. You
Okay.
asked for four.
Love that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you were not prepared with that list, but it just came out of you. I love that. And I have to tell everybody who's listening, if you are patient with your spouse who might not be as risk taking as you are as an entrepreneur, if you're patient with them, maybe they'll end up like me. Like I was not the original entrepreneur in our home. My husband was, and he helped me to catch that bug. And boy, do I have it now.
I forgot that. Yeah, you're like the epitome of that, right? Be supportive. Your
Yeah.
wife may become an entrepreneur. You never know. More
Yeah.
successful than you.
Yeah. He was very patient with me. And yeah, I love it now. I feel like entrepreneurship is the way. It really
Is
is.
the way.
You alluded to something earlier on in our conversation. This is the last question that I have for you, Josh.
Yeah.
You talked about how sometimes like you have realized that you really don't need a ton of money to live on, and you can live a very happy and fulfilling life where you have this beautiful balance between getting to help and serve people in your business 20 hours a week, and you have plenty of time to be present with your wife and your soon to be child. And you've struck this beautiful balance. And now the question is, how do I motivate myself to keep playing bigger? Because I know somebody like you is not content with putting it into cruise control at this point, right?
Right.
We're not going
Right.
into autopilot. So I'm curious about that. What is something that you're doing or even just thinking about as you're recognizing the possibility that you could potentially go into cruise control? You didn't say that, but that was just
Yeah.
me projecting onto you. What are some things that you're doing to maintain this continual growth and momentum and playing bigger? What are some things that you're
Yeah.
doing to help you do that?
Well, and I'm so glad you asked that question because I didn't want people feeling like, hey, it's okay to be in cruise control mode. It's not. But what you have to
Yeah.
focus on is what areas of success are you focused on, right? Am I needing more time or am I needing more money? And for us, it's honestly, I have to take a monthly accounting. Me and my wife do this every single month. We sit down and say, where are we at? are you working too much? Are we not making enough money? Are we making too much money? Where do we need to be realigning our values? Like, is everything kind of fitting into the right bucket is what I would say.
And is that like you assessing each other? Hey, wife, how are you doing? Do you
It's
feel like,
both. It is absolutely
okay,
both, because I can tell you right now, if you're a male entrepreneur married to a female, she is feeling overshadowed. And I know for my wife, that's something she's felt like is, "Oh, how do I keep up with your success? You know, you're on Katie's show, or you're out speaking on stage, or meeting these super cool people, and I'm here by myself." And in our case, it's just by herself. You know, that sort of stuff can creep in. So it's really good for both of
sure.
us to kind of keep each other on task. And so for me, my wife, my thing's business. My wife's thing is fitness. She loves working out. It's her all-time favorite thing to do. So she works out like an animal. So she
Mhm.
spends a lot of time doing that. And we assess, okay, where are you at? Is there a competition you want to get into? Is there a personal goal you want to meet? You know, and that allows us to feel like we're working together on it. So I think assessing is a huge part of it, but also there has to be a shift in your lifestyle at some point, because at the beginning it's about money. Until you're taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
it's about money.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to admit that to you, because it's so annoying. I hate when people who are super successful are like, "It's not about the money." You're like, "Yes, it is. It is entirely about the money. I can't even pay my rent. It's about the money right now."
Yeah.
Um, but until you hit that point where your bills are paid and you're comfortable, I feel like there has to be a shift to significance and realizing that there's bigger, better things. So for me, I have a goal in my mind. I'm just going to share this with the world. Maybe it will bring it more into existence.
Yeah.
Is I personally have a dream for myself that one day I'll be on vacation with Dean Graciosi, Russell Brunson, Tony Robbins. I can see it clearly
I
in my
love it.
mind. Three of my big idols, right? And
Yeah.
that to me is super, super important to me. And in order to get there, I know that I've got to get there in business. I've got to be there successfully in business, growing my companies. So that has actually driven me a lot more, I've realized, than just making my first $100,000, to where you're like, okay, I'm okay financially. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but
No,
I
it's
hope
good.
people look at
It's
that and
really
say,
good. I think money is an easy default reason to keep going, keep growing.
right.
And you have found something more important, which is significance and meaning and fulfillment. And you have that vision, that dream of the future day sitting there with Dean and Russell and Tony, and you're imagining yourself there, and that motivates you, that drives you. Because we all have, well, maybe maybe I'm the only one, but do you have moments where it's like, man, why am I even doing this? Like, this is so hard, and it's so much
Yeah.
more fun to just be with my wife and talk
Right.
about growing our family, that it's important to have those things.
Yeah. I think it's so crucial. And I think somebody's lying to you if they say they wake up every morning excited to go to business, to go work, because work is work. I'd rather be on the lake boating. That is like my all-time favorite thing to do. And if I could just be out there with me and my wife, life would be just peachy keen. So I would do that
Yeah.
all day, every day. So
Yeah.
in the mornings, I still fight that in the mornings, right? Is
Yeah.
saying, okay, do I actually want to get up today and go to work and get dressed? Yeah. Like, do I just want to sit here and be lazy all day? So everybody fights that. But I think,
Yeah.
like you said, having that vision in your mind is hugely important. And I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, they get addicted to the score of money. And they're
Yes.
saying, okay, I hit $1 million, but hey, I also know this guy who's making $5 million. So I've got to be making more than him. And then Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. I've got to be the richest man in the world. It's this weird addiction complex I think we have to that scoreboard of money. And I think a lot of people, if they'll sit back and say, how do I live a really cool, happy lifestyle, still accomplishing many things and maybe leaving a really big legacy
Mhm.
without having to, sink my life into 80-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks running my company.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one last question for you, Josh. I want you to imagine somebody listening in on our conversation right now, and that person is maybe the you that was barely making it, or maybe is making it, and has lost the client, the key customer, and is feeling like, what am I even doing? Do I even love this? Am I even passionate about this? What would you say to that individual? Like, what can they do to start pulling themselves out of that place and get into a place where they're feeling momentum, they're feeling that drive towards significance, and they're doing something that matters?
Yeah. I would say to any of those people, I know this is going to sound like a blatant promotion, but start a podcast. Um, it's a kind of an unorthodox answer. I'm not even saying go
I
pay
love it.
somebody to produce your show. the power of podcasting is that you can sit down with somebody who's at a level higher than you, and they will counsel you. I can tell you right now, we've interviewed over 1,000 people. I've gotten easily 2,000 to 3,000 hours worth of free coaching
So
from
cool.
people doing this show. And it's not just them being on my show. A lot of times they're like, hey, I'm really invested in what you're doing. Can I help you, or can I sit down and coach you for free? We've got coaching from people who charge $100,000 a year to be for coaching. They gave it to me for free for 2 hours. It was a really cool experience, helped me really break some barriers. So 9 times out of 10, if you're stuck, it has nothing to do with lack of knowledge. It has the problem is you're chasing too many things. And the
Mhm.
person who can help you get out of that is somebody you can interview on your show. So if you interview them, ask them the question that you have. You're like, I'm stuck at $10,000 total in my whole business. How
Yeah.
do I get past that? Ask that to a bunch of successful people and just watch what happens. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Such an unconventional answer, but I love it. I love it on so many levels. It helps you get out of your head. I mean, when we get in that place where we're stuck, we pull back, we hide. And you're saying, take action, get out of
Right.
your head, talk to people, network, make connections, and really incredible things will happen as you do that. I love that. And it's
And
so
ask for
specific
help.
too. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
There are so many people out there willing to help you. That's what I love is I think everybody sits here trying to hide themselves from the world until their product or service is perfect. But
Yeah.
if you just go out there and ask for help, it comes. It's crazy. And I'm not saying post it on social media. I'm saying ask somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and watch what
Mhm.
happens.
So good. Josh Tapp, this was an incredible conversation. I really appreciate your willingness to share with us the insights, the experiences that you've had, how you've overcome things and kind of the principles and how you put them into action so that you could continue to grow and develop. And I'm super excited for you and your wife. You're having your first child here really soon, and it's such an exciting time. Where can somebody who's listening to us, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. Well, Katie, first off, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just go check us out at podcastmultipliers.com. That's how you get into our world. I'm not going to give you 500 places. Just go look there. Like I said, there's all those free resources for you there. Go check it out. But I also want to just give a shout out here for Katie. Go leave her a review. It's absolutely crucial for podcasters to get reviews. And Katie's show is spectacular. I listened to it myself. So go just write a review. It takes you 2 seconds of your day. Do it on iTunes. I'm sure she'll love it.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem.
that. This was an incredible conversation. I was taking notes in my head. I was, and really appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show. And thank you everybody for listening.